For you all, my name is Dr. Richard, and I am a history teacher in the upper school. And I am here to introduce our speaker for today, as well as to introduce all of us to the beginning of Black History Month, being the month of February. And there is maybe no better way for us to inaugurate the beginning of this month, Black History Month, than the way we're going to do it this morning with our very esteemed guest, Ms. Carlotta Walls Lanier. On Friday, we spoke in the upper school assembly a little bit about the experience of the Little Rock Nine and the role of the Little Rock Nine in the larger civil rights movement. And today, we are deeply honored to have the youngest member of the Little Rock Nine, Ms. Lanier, with us. And she is going to speak to us today about her experience in that moment and perhaps more generally speaking, her experience in the civil rights movement and the remarkable career that she's had. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Ms. Carlotta Walls Lanier.
Well, thank you. Good morning, all of you here in this wonderful community. I'm very, very happy to be here celebrating Black History Month. I normally get all these invitations from January, February, and March, and I enjoy coming out and being able to tell my story, especially with the fact that in a number of environments, learning environments, that they are taking away, have taken away certain books in school, banning books, along with taking history away from our students to learn about what has made this country what it is today. And I happen to be a part of that. I really like to kind of talk about some other things at the same time, but being Black History Month, I guess I better stick with some of those things along with the book that I have written called A Mighty Long Way, My Journey to Justice at Little Rock Central High School. I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, in a segregated environment, and I hope you understand what that means, and if not, Jim Crow South. I will tell you what it was like. I had the great opportunity to be raised by my parents, Juanita and Carlotta Walls, and they taught me from cradle on that the road to success was through education, to get all the education possible and to be prepared to go through the door, whether it was a crack in the door or flung wide open. So the Jim Crow South was a situation where I was denied a number of things just due to the color of my skin. I had to sit in the balcony of theaters. I would buy my ticket where everyone else bought their ticket, but then had to go around to the back to go up steps to the balcony of the theater. I had to sit at the back of the bus when I got on the transportation there in Little Rock. I could not use the public library. I could not check out a book. I could not walk into the public library and get a book. The library for blacks was in a, and by that we were called Negroes or colored at that time as I grew up. And I had to check out a book in this Quonset hut that was in downtown Little Rock for blacks to check out a book. I could not go to the zoo other than on a certain day of the week which I could not understand that, because how, you know, animals don't know the color of my skin. But that was the way it was for me as I was growing up. And I went to a segregated school, all black kids, and it was a great environment there, had great teachers, and I learned a great deal there in Stevens Elementary School. And it was as I left that school going to Dunbar Junior High School, March 17, 1954, a decision was made in Washington by 9 white men on the Supreme Court. And they deemed this decision, Brown versus Board of Education, to state that segregated schools were unconstitutional and to desegregate the schools. And I was really happy to read about this particular decision in what was called the Weekly Reader. Now, I don't see too many white-haired people out there like me who would know about that, but those weekly readers was actually a newspaper that was written strictly for kids. Young people right here in front of me got this newspaper, and it talked about what was happening in our country. And it was written where we understood it. And we discussed this about the Brown versus Board of Education in my elementary school, in my junior high school, and high school as far as that goes. And we discussed it at my home, discussed it at the YWCA, in my church, what it meant for me and others there in our town, what that decision really meant throughout the United States, and especially in the South. The school board, a few days later, came before the various newscasters and stated that they would abide by the Supreme Court decision, but they needed to put a plan in place. So it took another year, a year or so, for that plan to be announced, because I really thought that I was going to my neighborhood school that September, but that was not the case. You see, I lived on a block that was all colored families, Negro families at the time, and the block behind me, a block away, was all white families. But there was this open field in between the two communities, two streets, so forth, and this open field. And black and white kids played. School will always start on day after Labor Day, and school was always out the day before Memorial Day. But all summer long, we played softball in that open field. And I would hear that they were getting new books in the fall. And I was always happy that they were getting those new books, because that meant that their books were coming over to my segregated school. I never had a new book from first grade on. I always had to put, it was always 7 or 8 names in a book when I received it. So I was always happy when they said that they were getting a new book, because that meant that their book, which was a little bit more, was newer, was coming to my school. So that was one of the impetus for me when later, when the school board basically gave their decision of how they were going to go about integrating the schools there in Little Rock. And here was their plan. They were going to build 2 new high schools, one on the east side of town and one on the west side of town. And then they would only integrate gradually the school in central part of Little Rock, which was called Little Rock Central High School. So that was the plan. So, even though I read about this in the 7th grade, it was not until the 9th grade of junior high school, once those 2 new high schools were built, and at that time, Dunbar was the junior and senior high school. So now the 2 schools have been built, and off went the high school kids to the new school called Horace Mann, at least for black kids, if that's what they wanted to do. And in the west side of town, where predominantly white families lived, was the new high school called Hall. Now, I live pretty much west central, or central west, and I walk to school every day. And I pass by Little Rock Central High School every day going to my black junior senior high school. And I wanted to be a doctor during those days. And I knew that at Little Rock Central High School, that in that biology lab, that 2 kids were dissecting a frog, where over at Dunbar Junior Senior High School, in the laboratory there, it would be 10 or 12 kids standing around the poor little frog trying to dissect it. So it was about an access to an opportunity to get the best education available and have access to things like the books and the best laboratories and so forth. When my homeroom teacher came in the 9th grade and was reading the list of things that were going to take place that day. And he got halfway down the list and he stated, any of you who lives between certain street boundaries and have any intentions of going to Little Rock Central High School in the fall, please sign this sheet of paper. So it went around the room, and once it got to me, I signed this sheet of paper and gave it to the person behind me. And that was in April of 1957. I thought nothing of it. It had taken this long from the time that I read about Brown v. Board and the fact that schools would be integrated, that it had taken that long. I just didn't think any more about it. It's just that, okay, that's where I'm going to go in the fall. To the point that I didn't even mention it to my parents. In fact, they didn't even know about it until the end of July, 1st of August, when they sent cards out, the postcards out to say come and register on a certain day. And I can still see the pride in the surprise and pride in my father's eyes, in his face, that, oh, so you're planning on going to Central? And I said, yeah, I signed up, and that's where I plan to go. So that is basically how I was not necessarily recruited, or people calling me on the phone and asking me to do this. It was my opportunity to go to the best high school in the state of Arkansas. Not only was the best high school in the state, it was one of the top 40 high schools in the country. Now, who wouldn't want to go to also the architects, the American Architect Institute had deemed this the most beautiful high school in America. It had cost $1.5 million to build this school. And I hope you, if any of you are in that part of the country and have the opportunity to go by it, you will see what a huge campus it is and what a beautiful high school it happens to be. And so, it was a no-brainer for me to sign that piece of paper, because this is what I wanted to do. I had been always told that be prepared to go through the door, and one way or another. So there I was, ready to go to Little Rock Central High School come September, the day after Labor Day. Unfortunately, the governor, well, first I thought the governor was doing what he was supposed to do by calling out the Arkansas National Guard to protect the citizens of Little Rock. And I surely considered myself a citizen. My father paid taxes just like everyone else. And my parents had voted for this governor twice before. I will assure you that after what took place that year, they never voted for him again. But that was basically how the whole thing started. The Arkansas National Guard was there. There were over 117 colored, Negro, black students who had signed that sheet of paper. 39 of us had sat before the superintendent of schools and heard the litany of things that we could and could not do at the school. Now, mind you, all of us who sat there, the 39 of us, either had been involved in sports or the choir or the newspaper or did a lot of volunteering in the city, were pretty good students, and then to hear that you could not do any of those things that you had been preparing your first 9 to 12 years of your school life, I think was probably part of the reason why those 39 did not show up on that first day of school. I had been captain of my basketball team, captain of my cheerleading team, and vice president of the student body, part of the National Honor Society, all of those sort of things that I was told that helps to make a good person, have good character, integrity, all of those sort of things. So to hear this, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm going into the 10th grade, going into high school, which I'm excited about doing, and I doubt very seriously I could be captain of my basketball team anyway, or play basketball that first year. So it was okay for me not to be able to do those sort of things that I had been doing all along. And I figured that once this whole situation was done, that the next year I'd have that opportunity to participate in extracurricular activity. School was supposed to start for us right after Labor Day, but we were asked to wait one more day, and that is because the Arkansas National Guard had been called out. We got there on September 4th, and I always say that we had 3 first days. September 4th, 1957 was the first day where we were turned around and asked to leave. The commanding officer of the Arkansas National Guard spoke to one of the white ministers that had walked with us that day after we had met at a certain point. And we walked 1 block, and there we were greeted by the Arkansas National Guard, who had fixed bayonets. And with that, we were told to return home, which is what we did. And because of that, a person by the name of Daisy Bates, who was chair or president of the Arkansas State, the NAACP, got involved and called New York and spoke to Thurgood Marshall, who was the executive director and lawyer of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And with that, he got involved, and he came to Little Rock. Not only that, a lawsuit was filed, and with that, it was heard in a federal court there in Little Rock. Unfortunately, the justices, federal judges that should have heard the case evidently went fishing, because they had to bring in a federal judge from North Dakota by the name of Ronald Davies. And Judge Davies looked at and heard the case and immediately stated that the governor had overstepped his boundaries and for us to go back to school. So September 23rd was my second first day. And we slipped in on the side of the street. By now, the crowd that was there on September 4th had now tripled. And it was quite a hard time for us to take a look, to even fathom that what was taking place outside of the school. We came in through the side door. I did not see everything that took place that day, but it was horrific. In fact, very similar to January 6th that took place. If you remember that, some of your high school students might remember that. But that was a hard time. In fact, the scariest day of my life at the school. And we were rushed out of that school, and with the police throwing blankets in the back of the car and telling us to keep our heads down. And I heard the policeman tell the driver, the other policeman, put your foot to the floor and don't stop for anything. And it was dark in the bowels of the school. And that piece, it just gives me chills every time I think about it, because with that, going through the doors of the school and the light opening up, and as fast as that car was going, was enough to to make your heart palpitate as far as that goes. And that is when that scene that was on national news during that day got the attention of the President of the United States, who was Dwight D. Eisenhower, who wondered what was happening in Little Rock, because he had spoken to the governor, and evidently they had not come to terms. And I think that the general came out in the president on that day, and he called out the 101st Airborne, which was the country's finest. They were known as the Screaming Eagles, and they had made a name for themselves in World War II. So it was 1,200 troopers, and I would like for you to think about your campus right here, to have 1,200 troopers bivouacked on your campus. They bivouacked at our football field, and they were our protectors. And not only that, they were there for at least a month on the campus, and then they transferred themselves out to Jacksonville Air Force Base. But I had a bodyguard every day to go to school, to go to class. They picked us up at one location in a military station wagon. We had a Jeep in the front and the Jeep in the back with fixed bayonets, and attended school that way for the year of 1957-58. It was not an easy way to go to school, but think about your school having the military up and down your hallways with fixed bayonets. And that, and to have one of these military men to accompany you from one classroom to another. And that is how I went to school in 1957-58. It is not the best environment to learn in, but that was what was necessary at that time. And then the governor was not through. He decided to close all of the schools in 58, 59. There was 9 of us who attended on September 4th, 1957, and September 23rd and September 25th, 1957. 8 of us completed that year, only one senior in the group, and he graduated in May of 1958 with the presence of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King being in the audience. No one knew that he was there, but he was, to watch Ernest Green graduate. And this is before, and I know you probably have discussed during the holiday of his birthday holiday, January 20th of this year. He was not that, he didn't have the name at that time as you know it today, but he had been involved in the Montgomery bus boycott, and so he happened to be in the area at the time and wanted to witness Ernest graduating from Little Rock Central High School, especially with all the things that had taken place. That summer is when the governor closed all of the schools in Little Rock, all of the high schools. 4 high schools, Little Rock Central High, the 2 new high schools, and the mechanical school that was there to educate the students. So think about 3,600 kids not having the opportunity to learn. And what happened was that one school was open with a Confederate flag flying, and you knew who it was set up for. And it was for those white kids to go to school there. All other kids either had to leave the community of Little Rock and either go to the outlining schools or do not go to school or join the service or leave and go and stay with relatives throughout the country. And all this litigation was going on at that time and in the federal courts, and it was taking a much longer time to go through that. So naturally, the 5 juniors who were a part of the Little Rock 9 were now seniors, and they wanted to graduate. I was a sophomore, and I was becoming a junior that year. I took correspondence courses through the University of Arkansas to finish my 11th grade year, and also went to school in summer school in Chicago to complete that, and St. Louis actually, to complete my 11th grade year. And finally, the federal courts deemed all that had taken place was incorrect, and to open up the schools in Little Rock. So that is what happened in 1958, and that 58-59 school year. So in 1959, September of 1959, I returned to Little Rock Central High School as a senior. And that was quite an event for me. It was Jefferson Thomas and I, of the original of the Little Rock 9, and 3 other black kids that went to school with us. So it was only 5 of us in the year of 59, 1960. It was a different type of environment. That's high school, white high school kids that experienced the 57, 58, did not want the same thing to happen in their senior year, and they did their best to try to control some of those who were really giving us a hard time. Unfortunately, on February 9th, my home was bombed. And with that, I knew that this had to be because of me being at Little Rock Central High, and they were really trying to get me to quit, which is something that was not a part of my vocabulary as far as quitting. And I went back to school that very next day. Fortunately, we were not, my sisters and I were not hurt. My father was working somewhere else that night, and I immediately called him to let him know what was going on. And unfortunately, he and another friend of mine who lived up the street had, after 2 weeks, had been picked up by the FBI and the police and questioned. And my father was beaten, tried to get him to state that since he was not at home, that he was responsible for bombing my home, his own home with his family in it. And the young man who lived up the street, who was a good friend of mine, we were born on the same day, 15 minutes apart, and grew up together, played softball together. He was trying to help the police, and they got to the point where they beat him, and to the point where he signed the paper that he had done it. And he spent 22 months out of a 5-year sentence of bombing my home, which he did not do. And it took a while, it took many years for us to, in fact, about 5 years ago, we finally got a pardon for him because that was not something that he did. Those who did it, who knows? I do not know to this day, and if they can live with themselves, if they are still living, then so be it. But those are the things that have taken place. Now, I learned along the way, and I graduated in May of 1960, and I completed what I started. And that is something that a lot of people question, why didn't you just go give up and go to the black high school, the new one that had been built? Well, that was not the reason I went there. I went there to get the best education possible, and not only that, Brown versus Board of Education gave me that right to go there. So this is something, when you make a commitment to something, you want to see it through. And once I got that diploma, the very next day, I caught the first thing smoking out of Little Rock. That was just something that I did not want to remain there anymore, but I had completed what I set out to do. And I think that that is something that all of you will think about over a period of time when you make a decision on something, to see it through to the end. And I know that my parents would have allowed me to go ahead and go somewhere else. I had opportunities even when the schools were closed, that I could go live with an aunt in Chicago or in New York, or go to Seattle, Washington, or somewhere in California, but that was not the type of person that I happened to be. When you make a commitment, you see it through. But I know it's tough for a lot of kids to even think in those directions, but think about it that way. But when you're a part of a group, and you don't have to be a part of a group, but even on a team basis, you have said that you're going to work together. And but on an individual basis, you have to decide who and whose you are. And I had decided who I was. I knew that I was just as good as the next person, and that all I had to do was to do my personal best. And that's what I say to you today, is that you do your personal best in whatever endeavors that you might find yourself in. Your classroom, on the football or baseball or golf or basketball court or what have you, or in the band, you want to do your personal best in in achieving those goals that you have set out for yourself. You have the opportunity to be the best that you can be. So you work towards that. And that basically is how it was for me. I have had a lot of accolades over the period of time. I am fortunate, and this is not something that we aspired to be, but to receive, but I am very happy to be a recipient of the Congressional Gold Medal that Congress bestowed upon the Little Rock Nine in 1999. This is something that was quite a feat for us. And we have received many other honors. And I just had the opportunity in December 7th at Pearl Harbor Day to christen a submarine, the USS Arkansas. And that happened to be quite a awesome event for the sponsors to be the females of the Little Rock Nine to be sponsors of the submarine that will be commissioned in another year. So those are the sort of things that have happened over a period of time. I did not go to Central to receive those accolades or those opportunities. I wanted the best education available, and I wanted access to that. And that is where you are. You are getting, hopefully, and I'm sure you are from the discussion that I had with your headmaster, the best education available in your particular schools. And what I would like to do at this point in time is probably open it up for questions that you might have that over a period of time. You have been quite a quiet audience, and you listened, and I really do appreciate that piece. Yes. Thank you.